Hello all, welcome to today's webinar. I am thrilled to have this opportunity to share my expertise with you all. My name is Sharath Nair. I have been working with Divami Design Labs from last 5 years. My specialization is in complex B2B SaaS web application design. I'm an avid nature lover, dog enthusiast, and a music buff. When it comes to design, my passion lies in crafting user-friendly journeys and data-driven UX solution that helps businesses grow. We'll get started. Hope everyone is comfortable. Very good afternoon. Let's get started. So what are we going to learn today? So as the topic says, how data is going to help us improve the user experience. So these are the couple of topics which I wanted to cover today. Relationship between data and design, why data matters, where to find data and how to get started, and challenges of data-driven design. So let's move forward. Relationship between data and design. So in today's world, data is becoming a bigger and bigger part of all the products or digital products which we use on a day-to-day basis. Let's imagine this example where you were asked to design experience for the digital world versus the practical world. In that, I want you to take an example of a user who wants to go to a movie, right? So what are the steps which he's going to take, or what his experience going to be? He's going to find a theater close by. He's going to book a ticket and then go watch the movie. But the steps involved for him to reach the movie theater and watch the movie, he would have encountered parking problems. He would have encountered reaching to the theater on time. He would have encountered a lot of trailers before the movie actually starts. So there are a lot of variables which comes into picture, which are not in the users or the designer's control. These variables are not in the designer's control, and we tend to oversee that, right? So how the experience of that user had been in the practical world, and how the experience of the user was in the digital world, that's where I want to focus. In the digital world, you are condensing all this information of the movie and how to book a ticket and put it in one screen, which a user can hold in his hand. So if I were to ask the same question, if as a user, those variables, if you take into picture, the interactions and the flows, the film itself is packed into a single screen. So our expectation here would be, how do you map those information? So in the digital, in the practical world, if you were to understand how the experience of the user was, you will probably ask him the questions, did the movie start on time? Were there any disturbance on the theater? So in the similar manner, if you were to design an experience in the digital world, same approach we follow, where we prepare a questionnaire, where we ask the same set of questions to the user. Okay, were you able to enjoy the movie? Were there any distractions? So what do we do with all this data? So data helps us understand how people interact with our product on a day-to-day basis. So in order to, once we capture this data, it is important for us to measure that data and make analysis out of it. Data gives you more control to make a seamless user experience. Data empowers a designer to make the right decisions. So I want to take an example here, which for one of the projects which I worked. This is my first project, so I'm very proud of that project. So basically, this is a SaaS product where it caters to asset tracking and monitoring. When you say asset tracking and monitoring, is basically I'll take an example of Uber, right? So Uber, basically you can find cabs, you can book cabs, but in this particular application, we are talking about an area where there are assets like vehicles, and then there are buses. So it's a scenario where basically you want to track the assets in an airport. So the problem statement here was once we understood the requirements and we proposed the designs, our designs were inclined towards a lighter version or lighter interface, considering we are using a map view, a live monitoring view, and where assets are being tracked, we went with a light interface. But what we understood, or what we tried in one of the user research or analysis, that we proposed a darker interface along with the lighter interface. So what we observed here is people came up with, people in the sense the user came up with complaints saying that a lighter interface is more like giving a headache to them. They are not able to assess the priorities for assets. Again, to give you more context, the use case is to understand what assets are violating certain areas in that map, and what if whether certain assets are crossing the speed limits or not. So that was the use case. So what we observed from the users was in the lighter interface was giving them headaches. The darker interface was looking more cluttered. So in this case, how did we conclude that which design approach or interface would be better for the application and the product? So for that, we did analysis, we did user research, surveys, interviews. And what we've identified was that by using the darker interface, they were able to minimize the violations which happened from the assets, reduced by 10%. So to conclude to our hypothesis, what we observed, we didn't change any interactions or any flows on the product. But the data which we got from our research and analysis gave us the confidence to go with the darker interface, which eventually helped the product and the users. So I hope it was clear and you were able to understand. Now, coming to the type of data and design relationship. So when we say data and design relationships, what I'm trying to emphasize here is in order to understand the data and design relationship, I have categorized them into 4 types. First is distrust relationship. This is basically you don't trust the data. Because you don't trust the data, you will never use it in your design. That is the thinking which you tend to have. If you don't trust the data, you will not be comfortable using that data in your design. Second would be indifferent data. You know that data is there, but you think that you don't want to use it. If the data is available there from your research and everything, but you decide or you think that, oh, it is not going to add any value, or it is not going to be useful for me, so you take a decision to not use it. The third is data-driven approach, which the topic says. Data-driven approach is basically follow the data religiously, where you collect the data and you try to implement into design as it is. But in this era or in this trend, we have evolved much more into data-informed design, where you don't take data blindly and use it as per the requirement. So you need to do proper analysis and take informed decisions to put or reuse the data where it is absolutely required or where it is adding value. So from these categories, I have basically put designers into 3 buckets. So let me know what kind of or type of designers you are. So there is a type of designer called hipster designer. Hipster designers are people who have their self-expression, and they don't focus on the function, but they try to add their own element into the design, or they'll try to have a signature style. So their emphasis is on self-expression rather than the function. The second type would be ego designer. Ego designers are people who are experienced, who knows what they are doing, but feel that they are always right. For them, if even if the data is there, they'll feel, okay, I don't need that data. I am right. I know what I'm doing. And the third category are the UX designers or the data-driven designers who don't follow data religiously, but they make the analysis out of it, or they understand the data and put to use wherever necessary. So let me know in comments, have you experienced these kind of scenarios, or you have encountered these kind of designers? Now, moving forward, why data matters. So designers don't usually have backgrounds in statistics or measurements or information analytics. So, however, incorporating data into our design process means we'll have to have use numbers, get around the numbers, and understand how analytics works. Designers cannot predict what users want and need. Right? In today's era, it is impossible to build a UX strategy without thinking about the data. I personally feel more data you collect, better the design will be. But there are limitations where, like I said, you don't religiously follow data and you use it when necessary, where it adds value. And you might have heard also that we make millions of decisions every day, and a lot of them is based on hypothesis and data. On an average, a person takes 35,000 decisions every day. So that is something which we need to understand. And coming to the part where who basically needs to know the data. This is in terms of your product life cycle, or as a designer, I am trying to explain who are the personas who would be needing the data or wants to understand the data or know the data. So when you're working on a project, stakeholders are the one who is going to anticipate the data and would expect that the data shouldn't have any surprises. And we have project managers. A project manager could not build a product without knowing the users. UX designers, of course, for wireframing, user journeys, and personas, all can be done only by correlating the data. And again, DevOps, they need to constantly understand the big data and its evolution as they move forward. Going forward, where to find data. So now we understood why data matters, what is the relationship between data and design. Now, where do we find this data? So in real world, data is everywhere. But if we were to understand what type or kind of data is available, only 20% of data is structured and rest is unstructured or semi-structured data. When we say structured data, that is what the company shares with you or is proud of saying out loud that, okay, we have users data, we have ERP systems, we have all the data which are collected and are structured to be consumed. But structured data mostly consists of quantitative data or numbers and everything. Unstructured data is where most of the qualitative data and insights come from, which consists of the 80% of the data. So what are these unstructured data? This could be files, your qualitative research, personas, interviews, social media posts, books, and everything. So this is to understand how do you segregate data and how do you identify data and how do you use it. So as a designer or a UX designer who wants to follow the approach of data-driven design, his or her focus should be on the unstructured data. That is where most of the qualitative and quantitative data and insights come from. Now let's see how should we get started. So more data, I explained, more data you collect, better the design. So basically, if you were to divide or if we have UX designers or designers in our session today who have attended, they know different processes of doing the user research and identifying the data or finding the data. So the two broad classes for data factor into data-driven design, or which helps us make design decisions, are quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data talks about numbers, numerical data. It only tells you about who, what, when, and where. And qualitative data demonstrates why and how. So another thing which we need to understand is you need to understand your users and their needs. From the data-driven design approach, we need to leverage data to drive innovations. Let's see what are the challenges of data-driven design. What I have encountered, or what I have observed, is when I have started with designing complex B2B applications, is we think data is only numbers. So when we don't see numbers, we tend to forget the fact that, okay, or we assume that there is no data. But quantitative data is not the only data which we need to do the research for. We also need to understand or identify the qualitative data. Second is we measure the wrong things. When we say we measure the wrong things, I'll take an example of World War II, where during the Second World War, the Allied forces, the number of aircrafts to the German anti-aircrafts, they were trying to understand how many aircrafts were being shot down by understanding in which part of the aircrafts were the bullets being hit or being brought down by the bullets. So for that analysis, what they used to do is the flights or the aircrafts which were coming back, they started analyzing in which body parts where the aircrafts were taking hits. So from that analysis, they understood that it's the wing area and the bottom of the aircraft where they found the more number of hits, bullet hits. So from that analysis, what they were trying to do is they were trying to add more protection on those areas so that they don't get hit and they don't get destroyed. But a famous Hungarian-born mathematician, Abraham Wald, proposed that in your research, they have only considered the aircrafts which came back successfully without any harm, but they didn't consider the aircrafts which were shot down and didn't return. So their hypothesis changed accordingly when they added the list of aircrafts which didn't come back as well. So from there, what they have understood is that, okay, the aircrafts which are not coming back basically are not getting hit on these areas, but mainly on the engine areas or the blade areas. So what they've done after the hypothesis or understanding was that they've added protection to those areas where the engine was placed or where the blades were placed, and then they were able to protect more aircrafts going forward. Another thing which we need to consider when we go with the data design approach, data-driven approach, is we need to consider the entire user journey, not just a section of it. Sometimes you tend to find solutions out of your product or from the user's behavior. So if you focus only on the a section of the application or the product or a journey, it won't lead you good design or give you better design. Establish realistic goal. When data is an important part of UX design process, it is only a factor in decision making. So if you are started off with a new product or something from the scratch, the amount of research and understanding which you need to have is way more than when you are redesigning an existing application or you are adding a feature to a current application. If you are starting from the scratch, the amount of research and data which you need to collect will differ from when you're adding just a new feature or just enhancing something on your existing product. So establishing a realistic goal is really important. And for many years, we have been following the user research process like surveys, interviews, analysis to better understand the needs of our users. But in the era of data, where data is considered as the new oil, we cannot miss data analysis. And this is going to help in all our design projects going forward. It is necessary to understand why data matters. So the job of a designer is to harness and leverage the power of the data now more than ever. So that was a quick session on the data-driven design, guys. The floor is open for any questions through the presentations, or if you have any other questions, please add it to the comments, or probably, yeah, we have questions here. Let me just check that. How Netflix suggests content to watch. Correct. Yes, anonymous attendee. Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, it's similar to how. So in my first example, where I talked about having to design a digital experience and a practical experience, there both places we are trying to collect data from the users, right? For the digital product, we have much more freedom and control, which in turn gives you the option to personalize the experience based on the user behavior. What I'm trying to say here is the amount of data which we can collect right now is, let's take an example of Netflix only. It captures what kind of movies are you interested in, what kind of genre you are interested in, how much time you are spending on watching a particular genre of movie, or how many profiles do you have, how many users are using the Netflix. So since we are able to collect all this data, what can we leverage here is the to be able to give a personalized experience to user based on the user behavior. That is where the data-driven design is going to help us. Definitely, Nidhi, we will be sharing the PPT once again. We will be able to make use of it. Yes, Naveen, we will be sharing the presentation with you. Okay, guys, any questions, anything which you want to understand for data-driven design? We will be coming up with more elaborate sessions going forward, but this was a quick introduction to data-driven design to understand the relationship between data and design, what are the challenges, and so. I think we have one more question. I had something interesting you just talked about. That is about different thumbnails. Jatin, when you say thumbnail, are you talking about thumbnails for the content, or thumbnail for the for profiles? I am assuming you are mentioning about thumbnails for the content. Yes, they are able to do that now. So what this I also learned recently. What they do is they have come up with an algorithm, or they have some kind of AI which they have incorporated, where they are able to take snaps of certain like thumbnail you mentioned from the content or the movie, and they are able to showcase that on the application based on the users or the personas or their behavior. Let me know if that was the question you were looking for. When we do research, which age group do we need to consider the most according to the user experience? Yes, Chayapati. So when we do user research, it's a little contextual question, Chayapati. It depends on what is your domain, who are your end users, and who is going to be the end user who's going to use the product. So when you're doing the research, I think persona is something which is going to help you understand which age group we should focus on. It will help you once you get to know who are your end users, you are able to shortlist into what age group they fall into. And in that age group, based on their behavior, you can segment them into different user personas. Hope that answers your question, Chayapati.
Sharad, first of all, great session, Sharad. I have one question that we got
Yes.
on LinkedIn Live. I
Yeah.
paste for you on the chat.
Okay, on the chat, let me. How can designers identify which data is most relevant to inform their design decisions, and what tools and techniques can they use to connect and analyze this data effectively? How can designers identify which data is most relevant to inform their design decisions? So, what I'm understanding here is how do you pick or choose what data should I put on the screen or what should I not put on the screen? That is what I'm understanding from the first line of the question. And then what are the tools and techniques they can use to collect and analyze this data effectively? So like I explained in our presentation, I don't know the name of the person, but yeah. So you have to, various methods are there here, but the important thing is you basically divide into, like I explained, type of data, whether it is structured or unstructured. And in that, the category would be quantitative and qualitative data. So for quantitative, you can do surveys, you can do you can collect data from the like what is their adoption rate or what is their retention rate. These are the metrics which you can get from the quantitative data. Sorry. And from qualitative data, what I'm trying to explain is how you do your interviews, or how you create personas, or how you take surveys. So from that, you will understand, okay, why people are not using my application, why people are not registering to my application, why people are not completing a user flow. So that is the difference between quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative will give you the metrics, the numbers. Qualitative will basically tell you, okay, why this is happening, or why a user has done a specific thing. I hope that answers your question, or to the first part of that question. How can designers identify which data is most relevant to inform their design decisions? So this again is contextual team. What I've observed or learned over the years is, earlier we used to have limitations in terms of presenting the data. If you observed our old dashboards and in our analytics page used to be static. So you are basically seeing a graph, which is a static information. But with the usage of data-driven design, or the data you have collected from the analysis of or the tools and techniques which you have used to find the data, we are in an era where you can show dynamic data or real data. What I'm trying to say is, in your dashboard, instead of just showing the graphs, if you are able to show dynamic data, when I say dynamic data, you can show what is the key things which a user can derive out of that graph. What are the actions which the user can perform from that graph? What are the things I need to focus, or insights I'm generating from that graph, which could vary from different timestamps, from my last week, my last month. A comparison from old data to the present data is what we are able to do today, or what we can achieve today with the collection of data. Hope that answers your question. One more question we have from LinkedIn. Can data-driven design be used to create more inclusive and accessible designs? If so, how? Yes, I understand. A very good question, Madhuvash, from the LinkedIn. Basically, when we go with the data-driven design approach, we also need to be catering to the different regions or different user behaviors. So when we say inclusive and accessible design, in certain part from the example which I took earlier for the digital, if you are designing for a digital experience with the versus the practical experience, you also need to consider what are the different users or the behaviors you can expect from the users when they are trying to go watch a movie. So that is one take on how to create more inclusive and accessible design. Sorry. Okay, Q&A session. We can get started, team. So we are opening the. Okay, yeah. Yes, correct. Thanks, Jatin. Do we have any more questions, team? That's very helpful. Thank you. Just one more question. What area should I focus as a beginner in you? So, Jatin, when you say area, I'm trying to understand here. Are you talking about domain? When we say domain, you want to, you are interested to work in fintech applications or a fintech domain. You want to work in a healthcare domain, or you want to work in product companies, or you want to work in a service-based design companies. So if I want to answer that question, I need a little more information on that, Jatin.
Jatin, we have given you speaking permission, so you can unmute yourself and interact.
Oh, great. Thanks, Susha. Jatin, if you can, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. Okay. While we wait for Jatin to speak, any other questions? Jatin, are you there?
I think he got dropped off, Sharad.
Okay, okay, got it. Anyone else who wants to have a Q&A or want to share your thoughts, please go ahead. Let me know how was the presentation. If you want to learn more, or you were looking for something specific and I missed out, let me know. I'll definitely try to cover it in our upcoming sessions. Behalf of Jatin, the domain. Ajinkya, so the question is specific to which domain which we should focus on. So I'm assuming that is what the question is. So Jatin and Ajinkya, if you're asking which domain I should be focusing on, I would say the more domains you get grips on or hands-on experience, the better designer you'll be able to become. I really find it very interesting to work in a service-based company, because the amount of knowledge you're able to get from working on different domains and different projects is not something which I personally feel is not something which you'll get when you're working in a product-based company. You get to work on fintech applications, you get to work on deep tech platforms, B2B SaaS platforms, you get to work on e-commerce. So the options are limitless, and you get to learn about everything and all the domains. So I hope that answers your question, Jatin and Ajinkya. Is for a travel booking app and a good service provider. Okay. Any more questions? I see one more question here. How can A/B testing be used to inform design decisions, and what are some best practices for conducting effective A/B tests? Yes. So the example which I took, Madhuvash, for the light and dark interface, that the conclusion which we arrived at was from A/B testing, basically. So what in A/B testing we do is we don't. Everyone knows that how as a user, when they are used to a particular experience or a pattern, it is very difficult for us to break that pattern or design. Whenever we incorporate a change, it might backfire. Some people might love it, some people might not like it. So what A/B testing does is basically we don't incorporate the change to all the users into the real world. We'll take a set or category of users and then test it on those users, that how they are interacting with the new change or the application. In our case, in that application, asset tracking application, we incorporated the change to some set of users and kept the real users on the lighter version. And then we were able to come to that hypothesis that, okay, from that 10 users, we got this feedback that, okay, they were able to reduce the violations by 10%. And based on that hypothesis and analysis, we were able to conclude that, okay, we should go with the dark interface approach. Hope that answers your question, Bhagavash. Okay, we have one more question. I'm not able to access this. Yeah. Yeah. Any more questions? Please go ahead and ask. How can data visualization be used to communicate design insights to stakeholders? Yeah, again, when you say stakeholders, depends, right? The application is being used by my assumption here is okay, clients and end users. So data visualization is another terminology, or what do you call it? Another functionality which we see, which goes hand in hand with data-driven design. Visualization, when it comes to visualization, it's how do you want to present the data to your end users? There could be a number of ways to do that, but what is the appropriate way or what is the right way is what we need to identify. So in my projects or in my experience, what I've observed is for the same type of representation, you could possibly have 10 different visualizations or graphs. But which one is the right graph is something which we need to understand from the research and from your end users. So just to take a very basic example, if there is a graph which we need to represent, and let's say we only have 3 variables in that graph. So the ideal approach would be to go with a pie chart, or to go with a bar graph, or some other stacked bar graph, or horizontal or vertical bar graphs, or donut chart. But if in the same scenario, if you are trying to represent 10 or more, let's say 15 to 20 categories of data in the dashboard, you will not go, or you'll not prefer a pie chart or a donut chart, because the amount of for slight percentages, the data will not be visible for the end user, and they'll not be able to make insights out of it. It's a very basic example, but that's the approach I want to make you understand that how visualization is also dependent on the data which we collect and the research which we do. Okay, next question we have, how can designers balance data-driven insights with their own creative intuition to create successful designs? Right. So to answer this question, I will go back to the different types of designers I mentioned. The UX designer, basically, he takes the data, generates insight of it, don't use it blindly. So what I've observed is when we don't, and when we tend to take data blindly, what we are trying to do is we are only optimizing the design. We are not innovating. So that is the one thing I wanted to add here is with designers, if we don't balance or if we don't generate or take or analyze the data which we have collected and don't use it wherever it adds value or wherever it makes sense, then we are only optimizing the design. We are not innovating there. So that is one thing which we have to keep in mind. Difference between customer experience and user experience by Rangaraj. So if I understand correctly, Rangaraj is trying to ask customer experience and user experience. But I'm trying to understand what does he mean by customer here. If I understand correctly, he is talking about the stakeholders or from the business users perspective and from the end users perspective for a product or an application. If my understanding is correct, then business user or the stakeholders who are the visionaries behind a product, their use case or their requirements could be oriented towards business or how to benefit from that business. For user, their experience or their end goal is to how to finish a task or how to get things done or how to reach from point A to point B in an application. So I hope that differentiation would explain or have answered your question. But in terms of research, we do consider the business user or the customer user's perspective requirements, as well as user's perspective and requirements. Where this comes into picture or action is when we are doing the feature listing in a product or an application. We do a prioritization of features where we consider both the users, the business user and the end user. From the business user's perspective, for him, probably the number of users who join the application is important, or subscribe to the application is important. This is an example. And for end user, the experience in the application is important. So what we generally do is we prioritize that information and then take necessary actions. In most of the cases, in our priority list, the business users and end users, the first feature or the priority feature, most of the time it is going to overlap and they are aligned on the same page. But there are cases when where business users have different requirements in terms of product and end users would have different requirements. Difference between product designer and UX designer. Very good question, Vaishak. So I call myself UX designer because I get to work on different domains and different. I get to research about different users, different products. As a product designer, I feel it's a UX designer is a subset of product designer. A product designer is basically more focused on what are the features which she needs to incorporate in the product, how it is going to be add, or how it is going to be once it has been designed and implemented, or what are, he needs to plan. Okay, what are the features which could come in the near future. So his somewhere UX designer and product designer in terms of their key task and goals overlaps, but I feel product designer is someone uh, who is involved more in from the starting of the product to the ongoing phase of the product, and he gets to decide what features um, uh, is should go in MVP and what features should be on the main product. Hope that answers your question, Vaishak. Siddharth, a question from Siddharth. When you are working on designing user experience for a domain that you might not have sufficient data on, how would you go about collecting that data? Oh, it's it's also a very good question, Siddharth. I have experienced. I have gone into that rabbit hole a lot of time, Siddharth. So yeah, you need to understand where you should stop your research, right? So this happens quite often when you get to work on a project on a certain domain which you don't have any expertise on, right? So in that case, you'll start your research work from one level, right? So from there, you will try to understand what that domain is, what is their expertise, what are their end users, and how it is going to be, how I can make a better user experience. So what I follow or what I tend to do is I don't deep dive into understanding the domain and the subdomains of that particular domain. I try to do a research at a high level for that particular domain to understand the terminologies and the essential parts of that domain, or how a very basic functionality or a workflow of that domain works. What this helps, or this approach helps us, is in doing that. Once you get a high level approach, you are able to understand, okay, what can I expect from this domain? And my assumption is that when you are working on such projects where you are not aware of the domain or don't have expertise, there is going to be a subject matter expert from the client side or from the stakeholder side who is going to help you understand the domain. So from our research part, I try to do a high level research and try to understand the workflows and the end users, the personas, and where that fits, and take the help of the subject matter experts. I'm not saying you don't go into deep dive or search in detail. You can do that when you are working on a particular workflow or a particular section in that domain. What I'm trying to say here is when you do your extensive research, when you have arrived at a particular functionality or a workflow, that what that will help you in doing is that you are not grasping information or taking information for everything in that domain. You are focused on one particular task at a time. And what happens when you go with that route is that once you understand one small portion of the domain, and then you move to the another section or the functionality of that domain, you are able to relate to those two things and how they are interrelated or how they can be used together. With the other approach where you go and do an extensive research on the domain and try to be more detailed about it, you tend to what do you say? You tend to not get the right information which you need for designing that or designing for that domain. Hope that answers your question, Siddharth. Uh, any more questions, team? I see one more. Have there been situations where getting insightful data for design results have been inaccessible or limited? If so, how would you go about getting the data? Very good question. Uh, I don't know the name of the attendee, but so this happens often. You don't get access to the data, or you don't have access to like the right data. So this is where the distrust relationship comes into picture. Right? You don't trust the data, or you don't even have the data. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't use the data, or you shouldn't follow the data driven approach. What we do in those scenarios are whatever data we have available or we have access to, from that data, we will try to do assumptions or take assumptions. We don't block our design thinking there, or we don't stop our work there. What we try to do is we try to do we take an assumption from the data and we move forward. When we take assumption, you have a direction to move forward. It could be wrong, it could be right, or it could be partially right or partially wrong. But once, since when you take an assumption and move forward, you have a direction. You don't get blocked there. Once you move forward, obviously there is going to be subject matter experts or stakeholders who is going to give their insights. Since you are not able to collect the data, but they will have the knowledge about the product, or they will have the knowledge about the functionality. So you go ahead with your assumptions and explain it to the stakeholders that, okay, this is what we have assumed, taken into consideration and proposing. They will give their insights, okay, whether this is right or wrong, and they will provide you with the data which you can make use of later on. Hope that answers your question. Yeah. Any more questions, team? I hope I was able to answer everyone's question as per their expectation. Siddharth Gopalakrishnan. So, in a nutshell, the design team will do a high-level research of the domain and take insights from resumes from the client stakeholders and get a better picture on what we are trying to achieve. I am not saying, Siddharth, that you limit yourself to do a high-level research. That is, the high-level research is basically for you to get started. What I have personally felt or I've observed is when you don't know what is out there, you hesitate a little to even step into that domain. So you have some inhibition saying, oh, this is big data, or this is data lake, delta lake, and everything. So you tend to get a little scared, or you tend to not go or pursue that domain, or um, some reason you don't go ahead with that. But what high level research will let you do is it will help you understand what are the basics of it, what are the nomenclatures which are used in that domain, what are the personas which we are considering, what are the industries which are there in that domain. This is only for you to get started. Once you have a fair enough understanding of the domain, that can be your base to dig deeper or dive deeper into the domains. I hope that answered your question, Siddharth. Uh, yeah. How would you go on? Sorry. Yeah, I think we have covered most of the questions. Anyone else have any other question related to data-driven design, or something related to this topic? I'll be happy to answer. It's okay if your questions are doesn't, if you feel there's no inhibitions here, you can ask whatever questions you have. just go ahead. You should be clear about the concept, and you should not have any doubts. I think we are good. I hope everyone understood the concept of data-driven design and how we can use data to better the user experience. It's 101. I'll wait for a couple more minutes if any of you have any questions.
Thanks, Sharad. Thanks a ton for the session. It was like really great. And as seeing the questions, I know that people took a lot of takeaways. Siddharth has one more question for you, Sharad. If you can quickly take that, we'll wrap it up.
Yes, definitely. So, Sri, so there have been instances where you can use data sets to perform data analysis or even run models. Yes, Siddharth, there are instances you must be aware of ChatGPT and all the AI revolution which we are seeing in the recent time, right? So yeah, there are instances where you are basically use data sets to perform analysis and even to run data models. Are you asking whether you need examples of how you use data set in ML models or analysis? I'm not sure of what you're asking. But if you're asking, yes, data sets are used for analysis and even to run models. The example would be chatbots, and ChatGPT is a very good example for you. It takes the data and then runs an algorithm behind the scene and gives you the responses. Hope that answered your question, Siddharth. And thank you, Sushri, for giving this opportunity. I was excited to present this deck, and we'll definitely share this presentation team. For people who have registered, we'll share it. It will be available probably in LinkedIn or by email, but we'll share it with you. That's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll catch up later.